Hello, everyone. Welcome to the GLORIO Chat, the best anime podcast on the internet. It's 2024. Hope everybody's New Year's off to a good start. Do you guys have any big resolutions or goals or anything for the new year for 2024?
Mission objective: survive.
Yeah.
Well, as the first post-pandemic year, 2024 will be
as the third first post-pandemic year.
Oh God. Well.
Oh man.
I think for the blog, I'm going to resolve to just use more clickbait. I think it's time we start doing YouTube reaction face thumbnails on YouTube. You know, work that algorithm.
You'll never believe what they cooked this week on Dungeon Meshi, and then you do the YouTube face.
Yeah, I'll have my, I'll face reveal. I'll face reveal for that if it gets us more views.
You put your face, and then you have the screaming Marcel face of the week.
Well, you have to put like something suggestive, right? Like,
oh yeah, put sensor bars in front of Senchi's fat tits,
right? Even though it's the
food, like it's Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even though it's not like actually anything, got to get those views, man.
Anyway, Photoshop like a prison lineup photo of Laios for his crimes against humanity.
We will have plenty of time to talk about Dungeon Meshi next time, but for this episode, we need to put a bow on 2023.
We need to look back.
And
the rear view mirror. Objects are closer than they may be. Than they may appear.
We're going to talk about our top 10 anime of 2023, which has been out for a few days now. So it's been available in written form, but now we're going to talk about it on the podcast. So before we do that, let me introduce everybody. I'm Jel. I'm joined by Iro.
I'm still here. I'm not dead yet.
Still with us in 2024. And we're joined by G.
What's good, everybody?
And we are joined by Zig.
Space is warped and time is bendable.
That is oddly appropriate, perhaps, for the beginning of the year.
Indeed.
But so our top 10 anime, we do a list every year for anybody who is not familiar. We've been doing this now for like 11 years now or something, but we do have everybody vote. And we have like a weighted scoring system where everybody submits their list, and based on those votes, we create a top 10. So it makes for some interesting results. Where usually, I feel like typically we have like a pretty solid top 5 that maybe doesn't seem too crazy, and then there's a bit of chaos in our bottom 5. But
that's the fun bit.
That's the fun in it, the fun of and having everybody sending in their different opinions and things. We also, I felt like this year in particular, we want to highlight, we don't typically vote for shows if they're still continuing on into the next season. So I think many of us probably would have, or possibly would have included Free Ren in our top 5s somewhere, if that were the case. But that is ongoing, still airing into next season. So we'll probably have that as a contender for next year. But those are the rules. And this is the list that we ended up with. So I did also want to mention, before we get to the actual top 10, there were quite a few anime movies that came out in 2023 that were worth kind of acknowledging. I feel like we've shifted over the past couple of years to where these things have become more accessible faster. Like we can actually go and see them in the theater sometimes.
I mean, you can.
Well, I mean, some of our other GLORIO UK people were also seeing some of these movies in the theater. So
that they're traveling several hundred miles to go to a special festival to do that, right?
Because they are willing to put the travel time in.
Obviously, obviously it is not perfect, but also what are you going to expect from international film distribution anywhere? But I think what Jel is getting at is that the option. Previously, there was literally no option. Now options are beginning to exist.
It's easier than ever to see anime films in the cinema.
And I think hopefully with time, like, and especially with a couple of like notable box office like successes, like this becomes more of an encouraged thing going forward for international film goers.
I mean, previously you'd have to wait like a year and a half until the subs appeared somewhere, right? So I
mean, we still experience that, right? Like we with the less notable stuff, like the G-Reco movies, for example, aired last year. Most of us watched those movies this year. So it definitely is still top loaded, I think. And it's still mostly the biggest names that are getting, the red carpet treatment, but that's still leagues ahead of where we were even just 5 years ago, I think.
There's also the fact that a lot of stuff comes to streaming services fairly quickly these days. So, it's even in that case, it's not, even if it's not a cinema thing, it's no longer a case of like somebody has to buy a Blu-ray and rip it and distribute it, or you have to import something or anything like that.
Yeah, like I think Crunchyroll already announced that they're going to have the Spy Family movie, that kind of thing, right? So,
I mean, the movie, for example, right?
Yeah, so just to shout out a couple of the movies, there was, the Kaguya-sama Love is War, The First Kiss That Never Ends, that I actually did go see in the theater. I talked about that pretty extensively when it came out. I might link the episode in the notes, but, we don't have to rehash it, but that was pretty great. We also talked a lot about Gridman Universe, not too long ago, maybe two months ago or something like that on the podcast.
It's only anime adjacent, but you were able to go and see Shin Kamen Rider in a
God, that was theater. This year. It wasn't it? My goodness, I did see Shin Kamen Rider, Hideaki Anno's Shin Kamen Rider in cinemas.
Yep.
I mean, if we're including live action, there was
Godzilla -1.
Yeah, Godzilla -1.
Yeah, well, a lot that was a pretty a lot of people are talking about that even outside the anime world. But so there were those. Peter wanted me to mention Blue Giant, which this is I'm sure extremely reductive, but it is a movie about some guys starting a jazz group or something. It looks
jazzy
very intense.
Teens.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. They said that was very good. And I wanted to find time to talk about this, but we didn't get a chance. So maybe now would be a good time to mention the Miyazaki had a movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
How Do You Live, or The Boy and the Heron, if you will. But and Ira, I don't know if you wanted to talk about that at all.
I want to avoid as many spoilers as possible in accordance with the marketing campaign, the non-existent marketing campaign of this movie. But I think it's very good. I think it's probably the best movie Miyazaki has produced in the last 20 years, which is a short list. But
yes, which to be clear may sound like a great thing until you realize how few movies he's actually made in the last 20 years.
I mean, the third, I believe.
Like the way I had to put it to Iro after we saw it in theaters was, you know what? I might go as far as say that How Do You Live is the best Miyazaki movie since Spirited Away.
Yes. Which is basically what I just said also, right? Because the movies he made since Spirited Away are Howl's Moving Castle, Ponyo, and The Wind Rises.
Yes, it's a short list.
I liked The Wind Rises quite a lot, and I thought that it was a fairly appropriate note for him to end his career on. So I'm interested to see what he had to say that brought him back to the table.
I would describe this movie as also a similarly career-spanning note to end on, but via a completely different vector.
Right. I would definitely say, again, to avoid saying too much about the meat of the film itself. I just think that I think no matter what kind of Miyazaki fan you are, because I think there are, for better or worse, I think there are different schools of why people like Miyazaki films. There has been, because of the release of this movie, some Ghibli discourse has arisen yet again of, how a certain type of media, especially in the West, will often describe itself as perhaps Ghibli-esque or Ghibli-inspired, and how that kind of just means, oh, we have pastel colors and naturalistic environments, but have sidestepped any of the often very, like, preeminent, like, social messaging.
Yeah, right. The emotional beat.
Yes, like, to Miyazaki's films, right? Oh, go ahead, Zig.
I was just going to say, on that note, sort of adjacent to that, but I do think that this is one of the more controversial receptions to a Miyazaki movie I've seen, just going by word of mouth. I've seen people who are broadly positive on it. I've seen some people who are quite negative on it. I think that there's quite a wide spread of opinion, whereas, normally even the people who don't like a Miyazaki movie are like, yeah, it's good, it's just not really my thing. But I've seen quite a wider spread of it. I don't know whether that's because the film itself is more divisive or just because people's palettes have become wider in the 10 odd years since there was last a Miyazaki directed movie. But it's worthy of noting, I think.
I guess the thing I would say to that is it's not, as much as we just said it's the best Miyazaki movie in 20 years, I would not say that this is his best movie. I would not say that this is like, this is probably not going to necessarily be up there with the, like, the truly cultural heavyweights, your Spirited Aways, your Nausicaas and such, right? But I think the reason it spoke so well to I think a lot of people is because, as Iro alluded to, this movie is very much about closure,
which makes a certain amount of sense, right?
It's very much about
coming to terms.
It's very much about legacy, actually. Like the movie is very much about what is the actual inherent meaning of legacy? Does legacy actually have any inherent meaning, or is it something we merely, like, choose to believe has any value?
Right. And I mean, to a certain extent, that was also the message of The Wind Rises, right? It was a message of, like, people will pervert your work, but as long as your intent was pure, and it's not difficult to see how that could apply to Miyazaki. So
yes,
it's interesting that perhaps he has chosen to keep on tackling that in a new dimension.
I would say How Do You Live is even, like, more in your face about it than even The Wind Rises. I think so.
Yes and no, right? It's
okay,
like,
fine. All right.
You know what I mean? Like,
I think one thing we can all agree on is that The Boy and the Heron is an absolutely terrible title. It's so, like, what was wrong with How Do You Live? Like,
I mean, okay, I don't want to, like, awaken this discourse, but apparently I looked it up. Similar to a Dungeon Meshi versus Delicious in Dungeon, this was apparently a mandate from Ghibli.
Sure, I believe it.
They wanted it to be The Boy and the Heron for Western markets.
Sure,
which
I think that's a bad decision, but I respect their choice to make it. Right?
I agree. I think it's a bad choice.
Yeah,
but
gosh,
apparently even Japanese creators are self-conscious about, like, how they're perceived by international audiences.
Yeah,
and they were worried that How Do You Live was too esoteric of a title for stupid pig gaijin to understand. So.
Damn.
Right. Although I don't know if The Boy and the Heron really tells you much either, but
it doesn't. It's such a bad title.
It's a more commercial title, I will say. How Do You Live is a fairly grim title for a film.
But it's perfect for what the movie is about.
Right. But yes. Look, Ghibli is not completely immune to doing things for commercial purposes, right? Like, it's still a profit making.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll tell you this, spoiler free. How Do You Live definitely has a mascotable thing. Thing in the movie where you go, oh,
they could make that in the movie. Of that. Yeah.
Is it a heron?
I will do not comment on that
You can make a 4,000 yen plushie to sell at the gift shop of the Ghibli Museum.
Is it Edward from Twilight?
I cannot comment.
That's like a several layers deep joke at this point.
Yeah.
But no, I do. The reason I brought up that side about like the discourse about how like Ghibli films are seen, I still think that like no matter what type of like person you are when it comes to Miyazaki's films, if you have ever appreciated any of his works, right, even if you're just like a fair weather Totoro fan, or if you're there for the Porco Rossos and the Castle in the Skies of the world, like I do think. I truly think, mixed reception aside, that How Do You Live / The Boy and the Heron really is a Miyazaki film worth pursuing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't have a chance to talk about this before, but because we saw it in theaters, correct?
Oh,
and
yes.
Immediately prior to this movie, there was a trailer for like what DreamWorks or Illumination or whatever.
Yeah,
their new family-friendly animated movie about birds.
That one.
Bird family trying to make it in the world or whatever, and then seeing that insipid trailer immediately before Miyazaki's idea of like an animated movie for the whole family starring a bird, is the contrast was.
Well, for one, that movie Migration, which I looked up, as far as I can tell,
doing way better.
Well, I mean, yes, of course it is, but like demonstrably better. Of course, it is.
Yeah,
it's a Western animated film.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, Migration doesn't have a bird played by Willem Dafoe. Coughing blood. So
perhaps it's best we leave it. We end.
Yes.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Willem Dafoe bird versus Robert Pattinson bird fight.
Yeah, you'll have to see the movie to see if that sentence has any bearing whatsoever on the events of the film.
These dramatic birds, these talking birds these days.
I know.
I'm coming hot off of watching Sasaki and Peeps, but we'll talk about that next time. All right. So, hey, movies. There were some good movies this year. We'll see how things go next year, and maybe we'll have like some other segment for that or something. I don't know, but we'll keep an eye on that. Anyway, let's get to our top 10.
I mean, speaking of birds.
Yes. So we're just going to go down the list. You can follow along at home if you want to, pull up the show notes or pull up our actual top 10 post, but which you should go read at theglorioblog.com. But we'll start with number 10. The return of Birdie Wing Golf Girl Story Season 2.
Despite the fact that we put this on the list, it has to go down as a disappointment.
Birdie Wing limping across the finish line.
Kind of.
Yes.
Got a bogey on the last hole.
Yeah, I mean, this is truly like the epitome of a show coasting on goodwill to its destination, right?
Yeah. So I mean, we talked about this extensively when it was airing, so we don't need to rehash everything. But we were a bit disappointed that season 2 of Birdie Wing kind of got away from the like chaotic underground golf energy we had in season 1, and I did enjoy the like soap opera melodrama stuff that we were getting, which resulted in some like absolutely absurd dialogue.
But where Ali's mother goes, "Golf is killing everyone I love."
So there's moments.
Legitimately some great moments still in the second season.
Everything with Coach Amuro dying.
Right, like dude literally like golfs the perfect golf swing and then just starts coughing blood. Like it's
it's very good.
Get to use his life
the
force.
implication that just swinging this stick at this little ball is so physically strenuous that like this man is about to drop dead from it.
Or when Eve like uses the shot that if she uses it one more time, it will destroy her body, and so her golf club sacrifices itself to save her by taking the brunt of the impact.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So shatters in her hands. Right.
There's still some good moments, but I think overall, it felt
I mean, it just became much more conventional. And
Yeah.
I have heard some rumblings. I don't know how true they are. That like the actual golf company sponsors like pressured them.
Did they
to
watch
like,
season 1 and
pressure them to make it more about golf?
rein it in.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, that's a very convenient like type of rumor that would spread amongst.
I know, right?
Yeah,
anime
I'm not
fans.
so sure.
Yeah.
I feel fairly confident that nobody of any golf tournament actually watched Birdie Wing at any point.
But I will say, I mean, there is another show on this top 10 list where that talk of corporate pressure is actually real. So, like, it can happen. I do think maybe in Birdie Wing's case, it's probably just that, you know, I think like a lot of shows like this, they start strong. They start with their strongest material, right? Like all the wackiest, zaniest stuff, and then they realize, oh shit, we're doing 26 episodes of this. You know,
we got to get to the actual golf tournament and introduce all these other characters, which they didn't have time to develop. And
I will say, just to stoke the fires of conspiracy a little, season 2, way more golf, way fewer gunplay. Makes you think.
It's true.
True.
But yeah, like joking aside, I still had a lot of fun with season 2 of Birdie Wing. It's just kind of they were writing checks that they couldn't cash in the end, right? Like it was still fun.
Yeah.
We still got a bunch of dumb stuff, but like it was disappointing when the final boss was a golf lady rather than, you know, some sort of evil witch or like.
It's like the escalation almost went backwards of like, you know, we start in this insane underground mafia base with the golf danger room.
Yeah, where you're golfing for your life.
Right, people getting shot in the head and having their cars shot with rockets and stuff. And then we end with like the regular international golf tournament. Yay! And you'd think that it's funny because they spend all this time saying like, oh, the legitimate golfers on the world scale are far more powerful than a lowly underground golfer. When it's like, you'd almost think it'd be the opposite because way more money can change hands beneath the table.
It's almost like the writers didn't read like literally every single fighting manga ever made. Where it's like, oh, you're the heavyweight MMA champ? How quaint. You haven't even fought in the underground arena yet.
Right.
You've never fought for your life.
Yeah. I mean, I think a particular disappointment for me was the way the Leo Miller-Foden plotline just sort of fizzled out. Like, if you just
arrives with his new,
give him, you know, give him a big climax to die on or something like that. You know,
he kind of just
he's
turned into a good guy. I don't know. But I mean, despite our negative energy at the moment, Birdie Wing is still fun. I think if you watched it as an entire package now, it would be a fun show. And I think I'm glad it snuck in here at number 10. So
yeah, give it its due.
Yeah. All right. So the next two shows none of us have watched. I will direct everyone to please go to theglorioblog.com and read our top 10 post where you can hear or read Yuri and Artemis talk about these shows because they actually watched it. I will do my best.
One with having like 10 people on staff.
Yeah, I will do my best to kind of give a little brief summary here just so everybody knows what we're talking about. But at number 9, we have Blue Lock. Somehow Yuri has become our soccer anime expert, and there are many soccer anime out there, folks. We have not really been covering them, but this to me sounds like the best one, and it is the only one that has ever made our list. So this is apparently a soccer battle royale. So 300 boys are put into this experimental program to get the best striker for the Japan national team.
Wait, I think I saw this happen in Kamen Rider Gaim 10 years ago.
They have to compete. Whoever wins will make the national team, and anybody that loses is banned from joining the national team forever.
Huh. Okay.
And
they're all strikers, I guess.
Yeah, because like from what I was reading and watching the trailers and stuff, it's like, you know, throw out all that team concept nonsense you've been learning as a kid. You know, now you got to be selfish and be the best, and you got to have a huge ego and to be a striker, right?
So I assume this is closer to the like Prince of Tennis style.
Well,
sports
that's the thing. So
where
from
they
what
have special moves compared to like, I don't know, ping pong, where it's
so I don't think that's the case.
okay.
What Yuri said in his write up, and I will quote, they're walking an interesting line between realistic and absurd, constantly opting for plausible but unlikely. So it's kind of like
okay,
they
no
are
snake
striking. They're striking. Well, I think he's saying they're striking the balance between, typically sports anime are either the more realistic, grounded type, or they're the what you're talking about, Iroh. Everybody's got superpowers, right? And it seems like they're not quite going that far. To me, I get the impression watching from what I've seen on the trailers and things, that it's the absurdity is coming more from like the drama than the actual powers that they have or whatever.
Right, they're taking this deadly seriously.
Something I did not notice in the key art when I was pulling that up for the post, I didn't realize later, like all the boys have like chains around their necks.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Like I didn't even notice that until like way later. I'm like, oh wait, that's ridiculous. I don't know if that's literal or figurative, but
if you get a red card, your head explodes.
Yeah, no, I don't think. Well, I don't think they're dying. They're but it might as well feel like it's life and death, right?
Yeah, I will say this is one
ahead.
of those sports mangas that has a significant crossover female fandom.
Of course, right? I mean, that is in many ways that is modern sports anime, right? And in the same way that like in the same way that a lot of men become fans of like your Precures and Magical Girl shows because of their all female casts, right? It's like you put a bunch of like hot athletic dudes into a room, and it's like, I mean, it's not only young boys that are gonna want to like watch a show like that.
Yeah. So
I will say, y'all are talking about plausible but unlikely, and maybe it's just a metaphor, but I will say like the only thing I really know about Blue Lock is just that like some kid just has fucking crosshairs for eyes.
All right. Can you
I think it's a metaphor for how accurate his kicking is.
Of course.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, again, go read the post for Yuri's opinion on it, but that sounds pretty fun. So as for number 8, My Happy Marriage, I actually did watch the first episode of this when it came out, so I have some feel for the mood of this, but it's kind of like a Cinderella story type thing. It's set in the Taisho era, which is interesting. We don't see that quite as much as some of the other periods. And there's this girl who's dealing with her evil stepmom and stepsister, and they decide to marry her off to this guy who has a reputation for being particularly cruel or whatever. And
but he's actually nice.
Yeah, I don't know if I would quite use the word nice, but he is definitely not what people have made him out to be, and she ends up having a more a much better life, with him and his staff than what she was dealing with her stepmother and stepsister, right? And
I think reading Artemis's comments on this, I think that this has a lot of the hallmarks of a classic kind of lower end of the top 10 show, which is that it's not especially a unique or interesting premise, but that it's a familiar idea but done well with a lot of charm, a lot of warmth, and it sounds like it's a nice spin on an existing idea, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it is, like I said, I watched the first episode. And I'll add, there are some supernatural elements to it, which I don't really remember from
magic, right?
I don't really remember that from the first episode. Maybe it didn't come up then, but that is in there to add a little extra flavor to it. It's a very nice looking show. I like the Taisho era look a lot, and the art, the direction, and everything is really nice. I think this was on Netflix. They had that Netflix money, so it looks pretty nice. The production values were good. I didn't continue watching it because it was a little. At least the intro was a little cliche, and also I probably had a lot of other things I was watching, but I did kind of enjoy the first episode though. Like it was a nice first episode, and from what Artemis has said in her post, it seems like they managed to put out a consistently good series after that. But once again, go read the post at theglorioblog.com, and you can see what Artemis had to say on that for the full details. Okay. At number 7, we have Spy Family Season 2. And
reliably excellent.
Yeah. I feel like now that Season 2 is over, if I have one criticism before we get into the good stuff, and maybe perhaps why this is not higher on our list, I feel like outside of the boat arc, the rest of which the boat arc was maybe like 5 episodes or something,
something like that.
Yeah, I feel like the rest of the season was like even more fillery than usual, which I know for Spy Family is not a bad thing, but I think I said this before. There were a lot of insert song montages, like that was just like literally.
It kind of felt like they were running in place for a lot of it,
and as if they wanted to get their big arc off before the movie, which they did, and the boat arc was good. And it's not, and it's not like the rest of it was bad, but it did not invoke any like really strong opinions for me, and perhaps maybe that's why this show is at number 7, even though it's really solid and everybody watched it. Nobody was voting for Spy Family at in their number 1 or number 2.
It's very consistent.
That said, it's like your comfort anime. It's a warm blanket. It'll always be there for you, and it won't let you down.
I will have one strong opinion on it, which is that Masaki Yuasa opening is one of the best ever. It's so good.
It's a good one.
It's good.
Yeah. It is very good.
Spy Family is fully entering the era of just these OPs have basically nothing to do with the plot of the season they're covering. It's just what if we just did a cool thing?
Yeah. It's fine. The plot's not really that important, right? Like, but
I think there were some terrific. We talk about how the season was mostly vignette-y, but some of those vignettes were outstanding.
Yes.
Like the Becky wants to marry Lloyd episode is incredible, where Anya just sells her family out in seconds.
Yeah, that was
be waited on by world-class chefs.
Yeah, we did get a chance to talk about that one, and that was a surprisingly great segment. But then you get the ones with like Yuri and all that, which I could care less about. But we all, if there's one thing we will all always agree on, is the Anya is the best, and that helps a lot. But yeah, Spy Family still good, continues to be good. The movie's coming out soon, I'm sure, and I will be absolutely shocked if we don't see another season at some point. I don't think they've announced anything yet, but I mean, they end season 2 with the usual "see you next mission" or whatever, right? Like, it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
And, we'll all watch it and enjoy it. So. Okay.
Yeah.
At number 6, we have Skip and Loafer, which I'm glad the show made this list, because I feel like my opinion of it has only improved over time. And believe it or not, I did not vote for this show. There were quite a few of us that did enjoy it. I was on the fence on voting for it, but it did make our list. And to refresh everybody's memory, Skip and Loafer it's like a school comedy thing about this girl who lives out I'm hesitant to say the country, but more rural Japan.
The Inaka.
Yeah, she's very ambitious and like wants to get into like politics and stuff, and she decides to go to high school in Tokyo, in the big city, right? And there's a little bit of culture shock, but she meets this good looking dude who helps her out, and he's kind of super chill, and it's a really centered around their relationship, with her being, very ambitious and energetic and him kind of being super chill. And they surround them with a nice cast of, just generally well-rounded characters. I think this is definitely a show that's hard to describe in words why this is not just like another school show.
Right.
And I do feel like as time has gone on and I've watched more school shows, I'm like, I've come to appreciate more how like fairly unique Skip and Loafer is. And I think it is because, the characters are great. They're not like cardboard cutout. I have my one thing and I'm going to do my one thing every episode. They have good and bad moods. They have disagreements. Like there's like,
it sounds like there's a bit more meat to the narrative than a lot of school shows as well.
Yeah, which I think that's important. I mean, again, it is mostly a show. This is my genre of nice people being nice to each other. I would still put it in that
healing
genre.
Shows.
Yeah, because like even the most like intense conflicts are not like that dramatic or anything. So I would still broadly put it in that category. But I think the quality of the characters and the writing and the relationships, the friendship between the two main characters is really great. How that develops. And I think that's a strong point. And then the other thing I would say is these types of shows a lot of times end up being kind of really slow and low energy and kind of dry sometimes, which is an acquired taste at best. And this show is not that at all. It's driven by the main girl, being very high energy and ambitious, but not like in an obnoxious like Yankee Girl sort of way, but
right.
In the way that young people tend to be.
I was going to say, like, often when you have like the energetic girl sort of setup in an anime, it's the manic pixie dream girl who's dragging around the chill male protagonist the whole time. But like this show is mostly from her perspective, right?
Yes. So, in fact, the main guy is the one character that we kind of never hear his inner monologue. Everybody else, he's kind of a mystery actually, but it is more focused on her perspective, and with her kind of driving the story. Like it doesn't feel like it feels like fast paced and energetic, which is also pretty unique for this type of genre. But
I remember really enjoying the first episode, but that was during the season where everything was airing.
Yes, it was one of the good seasons, right?
Yeah,
we had 2 good seasons and two bad seasons this year, and that was one of the good seasons. But yeah, it was really good, and ultimately, like I think the maybe the biggest thing for me is like I like that it explores like relationships, friendships, things in a very earnest sort of sweet way. But I don't feel like the show is ever like too like naive about, power of friendship overcomes everything. And, once your problems are solved, then they're never going to come back. That sort of like, naive sort of pandering type of, attitude that a lot of the shows take, those kinds of shows take, oversimplifying people's problems and all that. Like, I feel like it's a much more nuanced approach to it. So that's probably as much as I can say without trying to explain why this show is better than your typical show in this genre. But really, you should just check it out. It's also just beautiful. It's PA Works. They make stuff look good. As far as I can tell, they don't live by the sea, but it is sort of a pastel color sort of look. Very well animated. It looks great, and just a really fun show to watch, a really enjoyable show. So okay, so now we're getting to our top 5, and these are the heavy hitters here, with perhaps perhaps a surprise entry. Although to me and Zig, not a surprise, but if you watched it, but we have at number 5, Migi and Dali, which just wrapped up.
I'm going to put my cards on the table and say this was my anime of the year. I put this at number 1.
Yeah.
And oh no, go on, Joe.
Yeah, and I would say there are years we've had in the GLORIO blog where this might have also been my number 1. I did not vote in number 1 this year, but it's that level of quality. Yeah. And just for the quick recap again for the shows that are not season 2's years, and if anybody hasn't been listening to the podcast, this is a show. It is by the author of Haven't You Heard I'm Sakamoto, but this is a very different show. It's a very
it has some of the energy.
Yeah, I think the sense of humor is very similar, but the show itself is a much broader scope. I think it is about these twin boys. Their mother was killed years ago. They've been living in an orphanage, and they get adopted into this by this family who live in this perfect small town, and they are posing as one person basically, and
one
their goal. Boy. Yes, one perfect boy, and their goal is to investigate this perfect town and find out who killed their mother so that they can get revenge. And it kind of sets up this very just great mix of humor but it's also kind of creepy sometimes, almost a little bit of I think we've mentioned like Stepford Wives style horror.
Yeah.
Like
there's definitely like a bit of like David Lynch stuff in there as well. Kind of like
they do directly reference Suburbia. They directly reference Twin Peaks several times. So it kind of has similar.
I mean, like Japanese media loves referencing Twin Peaks, though.
Yeah, and I think Zig, we were both kind of on edge the entire time watching. Like, are they going to mess this up? Because this is very easy to mess up.
So I think
they kind of don't. They don't.
And I think there are two things which contribute to that. The first thing is they take their own premise utterly seriously. Even though incredibly insane things are happening,
yes,
nobody ever looks at the camera and winks metaphorically. You know. So the silly things are not swept under the carpet. They are established to have happened, and the silly things serve the dramatic things, and the dramatic things serve the silly things. Does that make sense? Like,
yes,
everything is sort of wrapped under a banner and played super straight, and so that's how it can continue to be kind of like, this is a story about hunting a murderer, but also we mentally regressed these children into babies and put them in cribs and all this other stuff. The second thing is, and I think this is what really tipped it over the edge to anime of the year for me, is that towards the end, it kind of gets even darker because I think I've heard some criticism of it that the mystery aspect is not actually much of a mystery, and I think that's a fair cop. There's not really, it is not really a whodunit in the major sense. Guess what? The most suspicious party is to blame.
But, yeah, I think I mentioned that last time, how it was like they kind of took the path of least resistance with the mystery part, right? So,
But what they do at the end is it actually becomes kind of an amazingly heartfelt, like, reflection on family and the difficulty of expectation and, like, sort of a critique of the whole idea of this perfect society wrapped up in some very, very dark and dramatic personal themes,
Yeah.
And it works incredibly well, even though the show has mostly been like an insane goof fest. Like, they commit to the bit and it works so well. And I think that's what tipped it over for me, is that we were all along, we were nervous about whether they'd stick the landing, and they stick the landing by just moving into almost an entirely different genre altogether, and it works incredibly. And I'm shocked. I'm still shocked that it works as well as it does. Like, it becomes a serious drama, and
and it actually works.
Yeah, it works incredibly well. Like, there are really emotional bits in those last couple of episodes. You feel shock, you feel sadness, you feel scared, you feel hopeful. All of that stuff. It comes through really powerfully.
Yeah, I think and to that point, like, one of my biggest fears in the beginning of the show was, is this just going to be, silly, when they were like in the first couple of episodes when they were doing the really silly stuff, like, when they were, you know, uh, climbing on their adopted dad's back and doing backflips to switch and all that stuff. Like, is this just going to be like a goofy comedy or whatever? Are they going to commit to the darker elements of this? I'm like, oh, they do in a way that I was like,
they double down.
Yeah, even further than I was expecting, and they turn it into something that just cashes in everything that they were doing up to that point. It's really great,
but it's also still incredibly goofy and funny.
Like, yes, but then they can still sneak in, like, let's say ghosts. I will broadly say, like,
magic ghosts,
magic ghosts. Like they could slip that in. Like, yeah, all right, that works. And so it is great.
And then, like, just yeah, I don't know, like bird guy for like bro of the year. Honestly, like the most reasonable and well-adjusted person in that show is the dude who like has a fetish for dressing up as a bird. It's honestly incredible. Yeah, and I think what made me pick it for Anime of the Year is that it is so different. It's so interesting and brave and such a unique way of telling a story that I've not seen before. And I like to reward that. I think it's not a perfect show. There are inconsistencies. I think sometimes they struggle to marshal the tones together, but I think the highs are so high and they get there in such a unique way that it's worthy of recognition, and I love being surprised. I always say every season there's something that surprises us, and this was the surprise of the year for me.
Yeah, there's definitely, it does not feel like any other anime, and really almost any other thing, like regardless of anime that I've watched. Like they are not playing into any, like, the anime cliche stereotype things that almost every anime does at some point, even the most
in fact
creative
like
shows, dip into that at some point, and you don't get any of that here, right?
And in fact, although they start the show playing the creepy twins thing to the hilt, they kind of deconstruct it over the course of the show to the point where, like, the ending is mostly centered around the twins finding themselves as like individual human beings.
Right. That's their path of progression, right? Character
I think I think anybody who likes anime should give it a go, because I think it is such an interesting idea, such an interesting story that would be such a hard sell in almost any other medium. That I just I can't say enough good things about it. I think it's tremendous.
Yeah,
I really want people to go out and watch it.
Yeah. I'll just finish with we didn't get a chance to talk about, because of the timing, the last episode, and again, just the ending. They really nailed the ending. The epilogue was great in tying up all the stories.
One of the very few time skip forwards epilogues that's actually worth a damn, in my opinion.
Yes.
I think. Was... sorry, may I say one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Spoilers, obviously, but I think the very best moment of that final episode is where the parents are like, they don't even have to say it out loud, but where the show is like, actually, we knew all along. We're not stupid.
Yes.
Like, we knew.
Yes.
They don't actually have anybody say, oh, we knew. They imply, they suggest, and it's a great heartwarming moment.
Yeah. It's a great way of showing their unconditional love for these boys, right? Yeah. Like, without having to over dramatize it or anything.
Yeah, it's a great moment. And that the match shot on the train platform as well is a really cleverly done bit, which I think is really good.
I thought you were going to say the best moment was the glow up for Beaver Kid, but that's that was hilarious. But
yes, I mean, look, Beaver Kid secretly also a bro.
Yes, possibly the MVP of the final episode. But so the ending was kind of bittersweet, because they do pay tribute to the author Nami Sano, who of course passed away earlier in the year. So there was the bit, I don't know if that was in the source material or what, but there was the bit where they like go to the grave or their mother's grave, and Eiji gives his speech about he'll say what he'll say to his mother when he sees her again, and it's kind of echoed some of her last words before she passed away, and it was like very bittersweet kind of tribute to her. But and they had the actual, you know, in memory of thing at the end for her too. So that is, you know, kind of sad, because just, you know, seeing the jump from her previous work to this, you know, I would have been really excited to see what she was going to be doing in the future. And
just the creativity involved. It it is bittersweet, you know. But
we did get this, and it was really great.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
All right, let's get into number 4. And at number 4, we have Heavenly Delusion. This is, man, how do you even sum up the premise of Heavenly Delusion? I mean, it is
it's a post-apocalyptic road trip survival story.
Yeah,
with a bit of a mystery thrown in.
Yeah, at its base level,
The Last of Us.
Yeah, I guess it's a combination of that, and they kind of introduce the other side of the story with what's going on with the mysterious, like, futuristic children's institute thing.
Weird pod people stuff.
So it's kind of like 2 stories they introduce in the beginning, then we kind of see how they tie together later. This show, I think, would have had a strong chance at number 1 if not for a big mistake at the end, like, which we don't have to get fully into that at the moment. We can talk about that later.
We've talked so many times.
Winner of the biggest foot in the mouth of Roman.
And I guess maybe if we want to like try to like still highlight, I mean, the show is still number 4, you know, on this list.
Yes.
I think because like I think Aqua like puts it really well in their write up for this top 10, right? That I think, like, in many ways, the reason why, you know, we have our feelings about how Heavenly Delusion wraps up is because, you know, unlike other post-apocalyptic stories,
yes.
But in all seriousness, right? Like, you compare Heavenly Delusion to, let's see, what were Aqua's frames of reference? The Road, The Walking Dead, The Last of Us. Like, post-apocalypse is often, I would say modern post-apocalypse, right? So we're not including stuff like Mad Max. Like modern post-apocalypse is usually has a very like nihilistic, misanthropic take on humanity, right?
Right. Like, the only other humans you're meeting are like bandits trying to rob you. Like,
yes,
the real monsters are human.
Exactly that bullshit, right? And I think Heavenly Delusion like does such a great job of imbuing its apocalypse with so much humanity. Every vignette, right? Every place they visit, every traveler they meet is like such a fascinating character study unto themselves. You know, obviously we all... Oh, go ahead, Zig.
I was just going to say, I want to clarify, that doesn't mean that, like, this is a happy-go-lucky apocalypse. It means that there is bad and good stuff out there. You know, there is a balance of elements. Some people are horrible bastards in Heavenly Delusion. You know, some people are pieces of shit. But there's also people who are genuinely good. There are people who are caught in a bad situation. There's people who, you know, might have been good once. It scales along the whole, like, human experience rather than just everybody being a cutthroat bastard.
And I think it expertly leverages its apocalyptic like background to like wring that out of each character, right? Like, you know, like obviously the highlight for I think many of us is probably like the Dr. Usami mini arc, right?
I mean, best single episode of the year, episode
probably
8,
yes.
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
but like I think almost all of the episodes like do such a great, like, you know, obviously shoutouts also to the Kai Igarashi episode with the the men who were the livestock men, right? It's like I think of that episode actually even more than maybe, because I mean I love like the Dr. Usami episode is like an emotional like climax, but
it's a classic tearjerker episode.
I actually really love the livestock men like episode just because of like how fucking
it's a real dark twist.
It is, like
the ending of that episode,
and just like like on some level you can't even blame the dude, like the just the inherent inability of man to forgive his fellow man, right? It's such
I mean that's the kind of thing we're talking about when we're talking about sort of the more seeing multiple sides of the human condition, the good and the bad, right?
It's definitely one of the darkest moments in the show, but it feels dark with context.
Exactly. That's
we
right.
don't necessarily sympathize with the murderer, but we do have some understanding of why he might do that.
Right. And I mean, really, I'm saying this to kind of reinforce that point of like the show's biggest failure is when they do dive into like the completely into the cruelty aspect.
My first fucking bitch ass storytelling book.
Show this guy is
just
bad,
absolute garbage.
That's the thing. I think Heavenly Delusion, when it stumbles, is when it resembles the most like The Last of Us or The Walking Dead, where it just feels like it is like grim, humanity's evil for evil's sake, right? Like just humans really are bastards in the end, right? And
I said in my end of year piece, but like that's kind of like it's like poisoning a well, right? Everything that springs forth from that is then tainted because now we have 22 minutes to justify this incredible, horrible, life-changing experience, and also wrap up the show and send our heroes on the way with a smile.
It's
unfortunate.
That sure found itself in a rough spot.
Yes.
It's unfortunate because it's a big enough mistake where you have to put an asterisk on recommendation of somebody, right? And that's
even though like everything up until then is so good, right?
I think we should also note that this show looked incredible.
Yes.
Like just absolutely stunning looking show.
I think production IG did some amazing work here. I think their choice of like getting a lot of different directors for the episodes worked out very strongly in their favor. I think like it fits like Heavenly Delusion's feeling of like a new day, new adventure sort of theming.
Because that doesn't always work when you do that.
Oh no, definitely not.
It does
always.
work here.
Just like I don't know, like they're the watercolor like with digital touch up backgrounds. It's what a great
2D monsters.
2D monsters, no CG horrible CG.
The dive into the mind sequence in episode 8 is where it goes into like streaky watercolor is
even just like the little things of injecting like life and personality into what is normally a very brown and gray, dull looking setting, right?
Like little character ticks and stuff.
Yeah, I don't think Maru and Kiriko would not have been nearly as personable as they are if not just for like all the little human motions they do throughout the show.
They somehow managed to have dumb anime faces in this show.
So I think, like, if I'm being, like, and I guess as someone who is still reading the manga, I'll say this, right? The events of the story did not make me drop the story, so I guess, I don't know if that speaks to its merit or what have you, but I guess if I'm being generous, I think the thing I would say about A Heavenly Delusion is, like, you probably want to go into it with, like, a similar mindset as you might approach a Made in Abyss, perhaps, like... I do think it is a story with still legitimate merit. I think it still has some really fascinating and compelling things to say. I guess you just have to also have, the
prepare yourself,
the stomach for it. Yes, prepare yourself accordingly.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we'll ever see another season of it. I have no idea how well this did. I didn't feel like I didn't see a lot of people talking about it, but
it got Hulu'd, right?
It's kind of an automatic strike against it.
It may have been a weekly release, thankfully, but
and I think it was weird on Hulu because as I was watching it on Hulu, I think they actually like split up the English dub and the subtitled version. So I don't know if that affects like how they're counting the numbers or whatever, but
that's just inefficient from like a bandwidth perspective.
It was whatever, but nevertheless it's a really great show with that one asterisk on it, and I think it's definitely worth watching if you're able to deal with that. So okay. At number 3,
I am shocked by this.
Let's talk about Pluto.
I am also somewhat shocked by this, though. I was shocked by this upon seeing the ranking. Upon taking a step back, I can sort of understand.
Yeah, I have a theory as well, which kind of ties into my long running feelings about the manga. But I think we should talk about how good the show is first.
Yeah,
sure,
so
of course.
So Pluto, of course, being the adaptation of the manga, which is an adaptation of the Astro Boy manga arc, The Greatest Robot on Earth, which I did read after.
It's right. It's so
after
good.
Watching it, which was pretty great.
1 million horsepower.
Yes, it was pretty great seeing like what made it and what didn't into the.
Yes.
What is it like just reading? If you've ever just wanted to know what it's like to read the conception of the battle shonen genre,
I know, right? Yeah.
read the original Osamu Tezuka, The Greatest Robot on Earth arc.
Both the battle shonen genre and Mega Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Read The Greatest Robot on Earth. But anyway, Pluto, of course, is it's based on that, but it's more sort of like detective film noir inspired type of take on it, right?
I mean, the cliche is that it's a grown-up adult version of the story. Right?
Yeah,
that focuses less on slam bang fighting and more on kind of like the moral and ethical repercussions.
Yeah, and we've talked about it quite a bit recently on the podcast since it was just last season. But
yes,
it's one of the best takes on the exploring the human condition through robots, which gets done a lot, but I feel like this is one of the best versions of it. With all the different characters that the different robots that we meet, each one kind of brings a different aspect to it, and kind of the conclusions we come to with through Dr. Tenma and Pluto itself.
Yep.
It's
Dr. Abdullah.
Yeah, it's really great.
Yeah.
I
think. Oh. Sorry, G. May I?
I'll go.
I think one of the reasons why it's so great is that Urasawa is a master storyteller. Obviously, he's superb, but I think that there's a surprising amount of darkness in the source material as well. Like Tezuka's work didn't necessarily explore a lot of the things that he wove into his universe, but he planted the seeds there, and that let somebody really skilled like Urasawa come along and sort of like build on that skeleton to create this very deep, interesting mythology around the story.
I don't think you get Pluto. We've said it a million times, right? But you don't get Pluto without Osamu Tezuka.
Mm-hmm.
Like being cognizant of these concepts, when he wrote Astro Boy. In many ways, right? Like the only reason they're not more prominent in his work is simply because the medium itself was so much more nascent at the time, right? Like it was still fundamentally like a medium designed for children.
And I mean, without wishing to divert too far, I think you see that in Tetsuka's career as he grew older and like his works became more adult, more sophisticated towards the end of his life.
I mean, even within Astro Boy itself, right? Like I have seen that there are storylines about segregation in that manga. So it's certainly
every ending of Astro Boy has him dying. So
I think like Tezuka having always been cognizant of those ideas and concepts. Like allows Urasawa to like just further like explore the depths of humanity that were always there. And it's wild that again, Pluto 2003, 2 years after 9/11, like I still think Pluto is the high mark of the AI personhood story. Like, look, I love me a Nier Automata, I really do, but Pluto is like the one. And
I think it deserves to be held among the highest lights of the genre, certainly.
Yeah. And I guess maybe it's cool that an anime was able to get close to replicating, I think, the magnitude of that story.
I think that the anime enhances the story in some regards and falls short in others.
And maybe that is why it's here instead of like the obvious number one spot, right? Is like, I think on some level, we all kind of knew in our heart of hearts, can you actually adapt Pluto into an anime?
I think they did as good a job as anybody could possibly do.
That is how I feel. I think, like, I would not hold it against anybody. You know, there are people in this podcast included for whom like the Pluto anime is how they like consume this story. Like, it is a very capable retelling of that original story. But it is what it is, right?
Go.
No, I was about done. It's just it is hard to replicate Naoki Urasawa's art, even given all the budget in the world. Like, his specific like knack for line and gesture, his ability to like evoke the subtlest emotions in a character's expressions. Like there are just specific panels of Geschicht I can think of that just like fill me with a deep sadness just thinking about it. Like, just the tics of his like eyebrows, the look in his eyes. The anime does get close. It tries its best, but
I think the main thing the anime gains is with the addition of actual voice acting, that adds a dimension of humanity to the characters, which is not necessarily there in their printed versions. What you lose is, of course, the very disciplined shot-to-shot paneling of the manga, which is so important because Pluto is effectively a noir. It's probably the genre it leans closest to outside of sci-fi. It's a noir detective story, and I think, the loss of that very strong author's hand present does diminish it a little.
Perhaps. Yeah, I did mention that being part of the inspiration. I don't think you get a lot of that in the anime itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that is a fair point.
My personal theory for why it's as low, quote unquote, as number 3, and those of you who I've spoken to before, and the people on this podcast know this is kind of how I feel about Pluto in general. It's a beautiful, magnificent thing. I think it can be a little hard to love sometimes. I think, to me, Pluto has always been a diamond. It is beautiful. It is perfect. It is a little cold and distant sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
And I it's hard because if you ask me to say, well, how, like, what makes you think that? I don't know. It's so perfectly constructed that I think it can sometimes feel a little intimidating.
And I don't even know if that's necessarily a negative, really. But when we talk about our number one show, I think that will be the contrast that I would strike as to why, I voted for the number one show as opposed to this. But I agree. They are dealing in high level concepts a bit more than down to earth human sort of drama. But but the way that they are exploring those concepts is clearly one of the best versions of this type, these themes that we've ever seen. So,
like, you probably don't even need to be told this, right? If you're already the type of person who's like, I like stories that examine AI personhood and how that reflects humanity, you've already read Pluto. Like, let's be clear, you probably already have. But if you somehow haven't, like,
I mean, it is one of the most.
I hadn't.
It is required watching or reading. Just know this.
Yeah, I probably should read the manga. But
Pluto is a great story, and this is a great adaptation of it. And you can't really ask for much more than that.
Yeah.
Ira, did you want to add anything?
No, this is one of those.
You did write for it on the post. So
I did. This is one of the. I've only read Pluto the manga recently, but my understanding is like this is one of those like anime adaptations that people spoke of in hushed tones for years as like it'll never happen, right? And
Yeah,
so
I am shocked that it is a thing that exists.
right, and even if the anime, especially like in the middle parts, it sort of becomes a bit workmanlike or like not that impressive as an anime adaptation of the story. They made it happen.
Yes.
It got done, and it. Yeah, as has been said, they did as good of a job as they probably could have, barring another 5 years of waiting for it.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's cool because there are, like, arguably even greater manga out there that will just never get even, like, a competent treatment, Like,
right.
You can say Berserk, G.
Okay, it's Berserk, all right? Berserk is never gonna get a good anime. It's not fair.
It's not gonna happen, yeah.
It's probably not possible, yeah.
Yeah. And so, Pluto getting it, like, managing to, like, make that miracle happen at all is kind of worthy of admiration.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say as the one that did not read the manga, I would agree with Iroh, your assessment. Some of it, especially in the middle, does feel a little workmanlike, but I didn't feel like there was anything lacking or like that felt like, I don't know, could have been done better in terms of like production wise,
right?
Other than maybe some technical things you could nitpick or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, I didn't feel like there were, parts of the story that didn't make sense or like the pacing was off or whatever. Like it felt like it was, they did everything right. So even without that context, I feel like they did a good job. So I probably should read the manga at some point.
It's good.
Yeah,
we'll get
it's
to
good. Turns out,
one could say you could read all of the works of Naoki Urasawa.
Yeah, I'm just not a manga reader usually, but I might check that out. All right. So Pluto, very good. Which leads us to our number 2 show.
Yeah.
Which I find fascinating because I loved Mobile Suit Gundam.
Coming in with the steel chair.
Also a show about robot people, kind of.
Yeah. I loved Mobile Suit Gundam, The Witch from Mercury, but I think we all agree it's pretty flawed in the second season in particular, which is fascinating to me because...
Counter-argument, would it be a Gundam show if it was not, like, fatally flawed in some way?
Well, to recap for everybody, I think broadly our biggest criticism is they did not have enough time to explore the ideas that they had, then that they needed to wrap up in the second part of the season, which was like, there was a lot going on and they just kept adding more things.
So a lot of stuff kind of just happens.
I think it speaks to how well they nailed the important stuff and how like how good we feel about this show that it still made it, in a much different way. It does remind me of last year we had Birdie Wing at number 2, which, quote unquote, objectively not a great show, but we loved it so much.
I think Witch from Mercury nails the important things I want from a Gundam show, which is it has great characters, a fantastic team of characters who I want to spend time with, engaged in an interesting and thought-provoking conflict. Like, that to me is the beating heart of any
You're saying show. Unlike other mecha anime.
Oh no.
This one is about the giant robots.
I truly, in all seriousness, I don't know how anybody can, walk away from Mobile Suit Gundam The Witch from Mercury and still think, okay, here's the thing. Gundam is a toy commercial. It is a glorified toy commercial. We all know this. I have,
always was,
I have, 7 Witch from Mercury kits in my closet, okay? That aside... I don't know how anybody thinks, oh, Gundam, it's not about the characters after watching The Witch from Mercury, which is, maybe...
really memorable.
See, they naturally assume that because Witch from Mercury is the only one they've seen, that it must be, have some certain elements that none of the other Gundam shows have, like,
of course, clearly.
Like compelling characters.
But in all seriousness, I think, Witch from Mercury is also probably one of those shows that just benefits from, nearly everybody on the blog watched it.
Yes. Yeah.
So even if whether it rates highly or not on one's own individual list, it is probably making a lot of people's top fives.
Yeah,
but even that is a testament to like some of its unique power, right?
Totally.
Like I think that there was enough positive buzz both ahead of release and also as the show continued that people who are not necessarily normally interested in Gundam shows were interested in watching it, and that's a real achievement.
Huge newbie boom for Mercury, like massive reach past the usual crowds of
like me and Aqua never watched Gundam, and we watched this and we liked it. Like,
right.
It's like I've said on the podcast before, this is like the Gundam we need in 2023, right? Like
it's a more I don't necessarily want to say palatable Gundam, but a more forward-looking Gundam than the franchise has been for a while, perhaps.
I do think palatable is not necessarily the wrong word. There have been interviews with like Ichiro Okochi and other members of the production who have explicitly said that like when they were producing Witch for Mercury, like before they even started, like they took a long, hard look at Gundam in the rearview mirror and asked themselves, how come nobody gives a fuck about this shit anymore? Like they literally they were how come only old men care about this show?
Right.
And they really thought about like, well, what can we do to make it appeal to a younger generation? And usually when you hear that line, usually start like the red lights start turning on, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like we're about to get Gundam for babies or something, right? Which has already been done.
SD Gundam Force.
And I think there was some fear ahead of the release that, like, the whole premise, it's set in Gundam school, and
our first female protagonist,
like all that stuff.
And I think that's what I mean. Like all these things in a vacuum are usually the types of stories I hear about, like horror story productions, right? Things that go like terribly off the rails. But I think credit where it's due. They like took a hard look at like how can we make a Gundam that's more appealing to a younger generation, and I think broadly nailed it. Like they actually did the things that would get like people outside of the usual spheres interested.
Yeah.
They made the characters speak like human beings. They made the lead character dance and sing.
Did they?
Yes, I mean think about the. I keep thinking about the when they make the
horrible
commercial.
Yeah,
the terrible low budget commercial. Like that's the kind of thing that feels like it would come directly out of that conversation, right? Like
right.
And that's part of why we love it. Like, I mean,
and I think they used the school setting in a really smart way because they used it to establish the camaraderie and like the teamwork that is an important part of of the Gundam experience, right? Like you need to have these characters work together and bond together.
Yeah.
And I think they used the school setting as an excuse for that, rather than as an excuse for a bunch of tired school shenanigans.
It can serve as like, because Gundam must be about war and politics, even this one, but the school allows them to have that in a microcosm that's safe enough for the characters to get to know each other without shooting each other simultaneously.
Right.
Like while building up to the explosion and in season 2.
Yes.
Like, I always think about just, like, Gundam School is, like, maybe, like... all right, okay, let me put it this way. If you told me that the next entry in the Gundam Build franchise had the characters going to Gun Plus School...
Sure, they've already done that in Build, like...
I'd be like, fucking kill me. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really speaks to how well they actually leverage the idea of that, like, schools are a part of societies as well, and in many ways, because they are where children congregate, they are like a pressure cooker of society's like values and aims.
And Gundam has always been a show about young people growing up into adults, right? Like that, being shaped by the forces of the world around them.
Yeah. Like, as goofy as Gundam School is, it makes you take a step back and go, what kind of fucking society makes a Gundam school? And it turns out not a very good one.
Robots are really cool.
Yeah.
But like, you know, even just like I think about some of those early episodes where it's just like fucking like on one hand, on one level, the story is just children being dicks to each other, but on a deeper level, it's like, where did these like discriminations arise from, right? And it like weaves that into it weaves the stuff happening in the setting into the school in such an organic way that, you know, again, I think we all wish this show had like maybe another 12 episode core at the very least, because
I think it helps as well that this particular installment focuses more on corporate politics rather than actual geopolitics for the most part, because it's hard to weave the machinations of nation states into the school setting. It feels a little bit more realistic that, you know, the Gundam school represents the warring ground of these large corporation factions. You know, I think that is a sympathetic choice in terms of the political setup for this show.
Right. And I think, again, that's a much more modern type of conflict. I mean, at least when this show aired, apparently we have now taken on several other geopolitical conflicts since then, but not to laugh at that. But you know, it starts out with people holding up signs saying "Space capitalism killed my son" or whatever. Like you know, that's another topic that is, you know, feels a lot more relevant now in our present time than ever. But yeah,
and it's, I think because of that, it's a shame that the whole corporate skullduggery thing, I think, is kind of one of the weaker parts of the show. Actually, I think that there's a lot of stuff happening, but not a lot of stuff happening.
Yeah, I mean that got undercooked. Like, I felt like it started off okay and kind of got undercooked over time. Yeah. Part of the rush of season 2.
I think, you know, I wrote about this a little bit in my end of year piece, but I think one of the disadvantages of having this, by Gundam standards, limited amount of runtime and choosing to focus so extensively on the characters is that you then sacrifice a certain amount of plot and world building stuff.
Something had to give. Yeah.
And so that means that the back half of the show kind of is fairly weak, which, again, not a thing unheard of in Gundam shows.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But necessarily, you know, it feels a little rushed, and the stakes do not necessarily feel as high as some of the best super real robot shows out there, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Right. I think it, you know, it speaks to like in many ways, right? This is probably, well, okay. Let me look at our top 10 again. I was like, is this the most flawed show on this list? Like,
no, maybe in the
Birdie Wing, like.
Maybe Birdie Wing, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say of the whole list. Maybe in the top 3, but
right. Top 3 top 3 hottest mess of 2023.
Yeah.
But I think it speaks to just at the end of the day how deeply likable this show is. I mean, we all remember celebrating Soletta Sundays. You know, just each week asking if those two crazy kids were going to make it in this messed up world. Like, you know,
remember how there was like a solid couple of months of memes with giant hands crushing people. Always bad.
The memes that came out of this series were amazing.
Just fucking watching all the remixes of just Choo Choo knocking that one girl out.
Or having to explain how her hair works.
Right.
You know, I think, yes, or like the production team drawing like diagrams of how she puts helmets on and stuff like that. And the thing is, like, and this is like a dangerously like subjective thing to say, but I think the ideal Gundam show is kind of a hot mess, right? I think all the greatest Gundam shows are like messy, kind of all over the shop, very personal stories. And like, yes, I had problems with the ending. Yes, I had problems with the structure. I think I was one of the people who was more militantly down on the ending, really. But I loved these characters. I wanted to see them do crazy shit, and they did. And I think that's the real most important part there, you know.
Yeah.
So this means...
were you going to say something?
This show makes Ichiro Kochi like far and away the person who has shown up the most on our top 10s.
Also that
across the history of the blog. Like, he also did Spy Family Season 2. It was screenplay on that, even though it's a manga adaptation. Like,
he wrote Lupin Part 5.
Yep, Devilman Crybaby, Princess Principal.
He's
got the golden touch.
He's got quite a career. Let's put it that way.
Indeed,
he is. Ichiro Kochi is not a man I would ever be insane enough to claim has never missed.
Oh, he has missed many times.
Like a
but he has hit a lot too.
Mm-hmm. He swings with his whole life on the line every time.
If you shoot at the moon and miss, you'll still hit the stars.
I guess the base. If we're using the baseball analogy, it's like he has a 200 batting average, but he hits 50 home runs every.
Last thing. I wish they told us what happened to Bob. What happened to that guy?
We never saw him again. Construction worker.
Weird. Yeah. Anyway,
shoutouts to the Guel redemption story. Not a plot line I thought I'd be so deeply compelled by. When I watched the first episode of that show.
Well, I mean, one of the I'll just for my final thing, like one of the factors that goes into like my favorite shows of the year is like, what are the shows that I was like excited to watch like right away when they came out? Like I knew what time was coming out, and if I was available, I was going to sit down and watch it, and this was one of them. So, and just even as crazy as it was, we ended up in the place we wanted. Those crazy kids made it.
Yeah, and they're canonically married again,
or so. Canonically married again. So,
it seems Bandai still can't quite seem to decide, but the staff that works on the show has made their opinions on it clear.
Yes,
so
they've made their decision from day one on that. So, all right, at number 1, let's talk about Vinland Saga Season 2. You guys, this is interesting because you guys watched it when it actually came out. I did not watch it until last month. Basically, I marathoned through most of it. I kind of wish I had watched it at that time because I would have
probably been the better way.
Talk more in depth, but I hadn't even watched season 1 at that point, so like it was just not going to happen. So this, of course, Vinland Saga is Vikings.
Just Vikings.
Just Vikings.
I'm reliably informed that Vikings are problematic.
They take the all the violence.
Good news, Zig. That's also Vinland Saga's thesis.
They take all the violence and the let's just say toxic masculinity that come along with the concept of Vikings that make everybody go say, "Wow, cool Vikings," and they say that among other things is bad.
Actually, this sucks.
Actually, it's terrible, and killing people, attempting to own them, slavery, all of that is bad. Which you'd think we would not have to say, but
well, I think
it's. Go ahead, G.
I think what Vinland Saga does so effectively, right, is look. Vinland Saga is not the first war is bad story, right? It is, most certainly.
It's not the first war is bad story on this list.
No.
Right.
But I think Vinland Saga, where it really shines is in the time it takes to examine these thoughts, these ideas through its viewpoint character of Thorfinn. I truly believe that a story like Vinland Saga does not get to exist without requiring 48 episodes, 24 of which are fairly grim but also high-octane Viking violent action. And then immediately contrasting that with another 24 episodes of just some of the grimmest examinations of the human condition I think I've seen in anime.
Yeah, so the big sort of bold move of Vinland Saga is season 1 is Viking warfare, people fighting in a lot of extreme violence, and the show is always telling you that this is bad, but it is going on through the most of season 1.
Right. The themes that eventually become fully realized in season 2.
Are you saying that season 1 is wow, cool Viking, and season 2 is bad?
That's like extremely reductive, but I mean, kind of. But
it's also a joke. I would not I try not to ever pretend that season 1's no good, don't bother with it. I think season 1 is a pretty good story unto itself. It is it is a revenge story.
And if you're reading the very obvious theme, but apparently some people still miss it, of season 1, it's clear where they're going with it, and season 2 should not be a shock. I do think it is a bit of a shock in how hard they commit to going to what we lovingly call Farmland Saga. Some people don't call it that, but it's complete different it almost feels like a different show in season 2, where Thorfinn has left his Viking life and he is now a slave on a farm, right? And it's a very bold move, because a lot of people, I think from what I've seen, most people broadly enjoyed it and understood what was going on, but a lot of people didn't. They were there they fell for the wow, cool Viking, right? And it kind of annoys me to see that. But season 2, though, is where they really hammer down what they've been trying to say. The author's real hatred of violence, and it's not just war is bad. It's I mentioned this. The one bit I did get to write about this was in my top moments post, because one of my top moments was the bit where in season 2 they're enslaver, or owner, if we want to say that. It kind of reveals his true. Most of the show, he's shown to be sort of a more
relatively nice slave.
Yeah, I'm not going to use the word sympathetic, but he's he seems to have a kindness to him that you would not expect from an enslaver.
And in the context of a story and history, he is a quote unquote good slave owner,
right?
This is the thing that Vinland Saga plays with Kettle, is he has no legal obligation to be nice to his slaves. At least when he is feeling benevolent, he chooses to be benevolent.
when it either benefits him or doesn't
does not inconvenience him.
Does not inconvenience him. Then yes, when it's not going to affect him, he has no problem kind of being nice to people, and that is better than what a lot of the people we've seen, which is kind of what they're getting at, though, because when he does kind of show his true colors, it unravels this. They're not just getting into war is bad; they're getting into the actual the mindset, the ego, the societal pressure for men to be big and strong and violent and take charge of what's theirs and not let anybody take what belongs to them, and the entitlement with all that. All those things are explored. So it's not just, okay, yes, we know killing people is bad. That's easy.
But also the spiritual and material conditions that lead to people killing people are also bad.
Right.
Yes, but
the
yes.
Vinland Saga posits that war is just a symptom of...
Right, exactly. That's kind of what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah.
It gets into the real problems of what is underlying with why these people are like this. And it does it in very human stories that if we're gonna, so I'll come back around. I was talking about why I voted for this over Pluto. This show had me almost openly weeping at some points. There was a level of humanity to it that was a lot closer to home than, again, Pluto's great. I'm not knocking Pluto on this. I'm just saying, for me,
right, of course,
that is a more sort of high level abstract sort of exploration. There are some
Well,
there are some powerful
distance.
there are some powerful emotion moments in Pluto for sure, but like generally those characters are concepts, right? And
Vinland Saga seems very down in the blood and dirt.
Yes, this is extremely into the dirt, like
from the bottom looking up.
Yeah, like, and it makes it extremely powerful.
It speaks to like this show that like I can imagine some of the scenes and characters you're probably thinking about, but I can't even nail the specific one because there are so many moments in Vinland Saga that just like again, yeah, I guess kind of similarly to Pluto, like plumb the depths of the human condition, but do so from like such a deeply personal angle. Like I mean, like most of the
basically the entire Arnate arc, right? Like,
yes, the Arnate arc is fucking soul crushing. It's like, for context, like in this show, Thorfinn meets a female slave named Arnheid, and whereas Thorfinn has the option to eventually work off his debt and thus buy his freedom, Arnheid is a young woman in a medieval society. She is going to be a slave for the rest of her life, and the one time in this story where she is given a potential out, it becomes like the greatest tragedy of her life, and
it goes very badly. And yeah,
it's so raw. And like, I mean, all the like, I do want to give a shout out to Einar as well, like Thorfinn's like friend, the friend he makes in this story, who's like, he doesn't really get the biggest moments in this story, but like, I really do love what Einar brings to Thorfinn as a character. Like, Einar is not a warrior. He's not like...
He's just a guy, right?
He's just a guy.
Yeah.
And he's just trying fucking hard.
Which, for context, this is coming off of season 1 where everyone is like a superhero Viking that can, throw an axe 300 feet and chop somebody's... split somebody's head like on a boat 100 meters out or something. And
season 1 has an episode in which Askeladd orders his like Viking crew to just slaughter a whole village of people like Einar. Like, it's
it's not like he's like quote unquote weak or anything, but he's just a guy, right? Like he doesn't know, he can't fight or anything. He's
and I think, like, in many ways, that is what, Vinland Saga is, like, trying to, like, show the triumph of the strength of the meek, in many ways, right? Like that, in a world this cruel, this oppressive, like, someone has to take that first step, right? Someone has to begin asking the question, it can't be like this. And that character's Einar. Like Einar is the one who, like, incepts the idea of pacifism into Thorfinn. Like, incepts the idea that there must be a better world than this. Like, Einar is the one who inspires Thorfinn to seek Vinland. And, I mean...
I think that's
in this show. It's so good.
I think that's important because while we are describing some very like heavy and like just evil things going on, right? Like I never felt like it was like being too dour or hopeless, right? Like we're not just saying that people are terrible for the sake of saying people are terrible, right? There is this line of hope and humanity where Thorfinn meets he meets a lot of bad people, but he also meets people who are also trying to do their best and willing to help him out, right? And
the system can be broken,
and even if it can't, it's at least worth doing what you can to
trying
right? Like because we know Thorfinn is not going to succeed in his goal because we know history, right? But it's it never feels like totally soul crushing or hopeless because you feel like he's doing the right thing. And I don't know, this show just made me feel things, man, at the end of the day, that I
The highest endorsement that can possibly be given.
Put that on the back of the box.
Yeah.
This show made me feel things. Yeah, that would be the second anime I get quoted on the back of the box, right?
Yeah.
And
Nairo,
you were going to say?
Yeah, as you note in like the top 10 post G, and as we briefly touched on earlier, like this is what you can get out of something that's willing to like take the slow burn, right, over 2 whole seasons and tonal shifts, and it takes a time to like build up the ideas in season 1, build up Thorfinn, tear him down, and spend that time of it lends so much more humanity and depth to these sorts of situations when it has spent the time to allow him to put the pieces back together. Right?
It has put the work in. I think in many ways, Vinland Saga reminds me that like this is kind of the only way to do redemption stories right. Like I very rarely empathize with redemption stories in a lot of like Japanese fiction when they happen too quickly. Like it's Vinland Saga and it's Onani Masakura Saga. Those are the two. In all seriousness.
Yep.
Thorfinn earns his like I think hell, even pacifism, right? Even like Thorfinn's big moment at the end of season 2 when he is beaten and bloody and bruised. Like he barely even looks human.
Yeah.
Proudly declares to King Canute, I have no enemies. And that hits because Thorfinn has spent the last 23 episodes thinking about what does that mean? Like, what is an enemy? Like, who exists in this world that it is, like, worth committing violence upon? Like, is there such a thing as righteous violence?
Right. And then, like, him working through those things has weight because the 24 episodes before that is just him killing people repeatedly.
Just fucking human blendering people. Yeah, it's
right. But like, I think a lot of, and this isn't just animated fiction in general, a lot of redemption arcs ring hollow because we don't see the truly heinous shit that the person who is trying to be redeemed has done. Right. Whereas here we see that like, like our dude has done some bad things,
and they never make excuses for what Thorfinn did. Like, there's no ever like when we're talking about redemption, it's more of his personal growth, not like, oh, you're forgiven for the things that you did. No, he always has to carry that weight, right? Like,
yes,
and
like
a lot
that's the whole point of like his dream sequence with Askeladd. Essentially,
he will never be forgiven,
right? So like, I think that's an important part too, because I feel like a lot of weak redemption stories are like, oh, well, he did this because he was trying to save his sick sister or something, right? Like that, those kind of plot lines.
Right.
And like, oh, well, maybe,
or just now he feels bad about it.
Well, he feels bad about it, so it's okay.
Evil.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like, no, what he did was wrong. Like, there was no question, and he's going to have to live with that for the rest of his life. But it doesn't mean he can't be a better person, right? And, it's just so good. Again, could they have told this story in less time? Probably, and other shows probably would attempt that. But the fact that they did give everything the time that it needed really makes it hit hard. When they get to the big moments. I mean, really the only somewhat weak points for me were like the Canute stuff was a little weak to me, but like his whole transformation and everything. Yeah. But he's also not like, I mean, he gets a couple episodes, but he's not like that big of a presence in the grand picture of things. But
I think Canute more exists to serve as like a mirror to Thorfinn's growth, where Canute in season 1 is a very kind, soft man, right? Like he is, you get those flashbacks to his childhood. You see him as he is in season 1, and in the same way that like Vinland Saga says, this is like takes Canute and says this is what this society turns a good man into, right? It turns them into King Canute. A warmonger, essentially, a conqueror. Maybe one of the better conquerors in history, if we're grading on a scale, but at the end of the day, still someone who fundamentally believes that violence is the most politically expedient way to achieve a better world.
And like thematically that makes sense. I just think the execution of how he got there was kind of, some Anakin Skywalker vibes, but
damn,
not bad, but kind of in that
of not liking sand.
yeah, but that was, but again, that's I don't feel like that really detracted from anything. That was just kind of my one maybe criticism, but yeah, it's just a really, really great show. And the only other thing I would say is I think you do need to be in the right mindset to watch this. Like, it's really unfortunate that I had to force myself to marathon this to make it in time, because watching like 10 episodes of Vinland Saga season 2 in a row is not good for your mental state.
Oh, it sounds so frustrating. Yeah. But I think, all truly great pieces of media demand that, they take a lot out of you. You have to put a lot of yourself in, and you get out whatever you get out, But yeah, just hearing you guys describe it conveys some of like the power and the strength of the emotion behind it. And it's no matter how I feel about the other shows, it's very hard to argue with the kind of thing that you guys are talking about.
Yeah,
it's good. And we'll never have to see any more Vinland Saga after this.
Oh yeah, no, story's over.
Oh no, is it one of those situations where
well, I'll put it this way, like,
it's not as bad as Promised Neverland, right?
No, it's just that Vinland, I think, like, what has been covered in the Vinland Saga anime, I believe, is the story Makoto Yukimura likely set out to write when he first started writing Vinland Saga. Yeah. And thus, it is this, like, perfectly crafted artifice, like, from start to finish. You can feel, this is what he was building up towards.
We come full circle.
I'm entirely satisfied. I don't want to watch more. Like, I'm entirely satisfied.
We come full circle to Thorfinn telling the dying slave about Vinland. All right, like
Yes, that is literally how the season ends in a ways, right? It's just reflecting the actions of his father. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think if this is all we ever get of Vinland Saga, like, this will still have been a perfectly told story. I think it's fine that the story ends like on a hopeful message without necessarily a payoff on that. Like, in many ways, I truly do believe like that is what makes Vinland Saga stand out from, again, when we were talking about Heavenly Delusion, like why we kind of pass on the grimmer, like, post-apocalypse stories, right? Like Vinland Saga is a grim story, but it is not one bereft of hope, right? In fact, as I kind of write, Vinland Saga almost kind of dares you to hope for a better world in spite of everything, right? Like, that's kind of its core message, is that the world might be a pretty bad place, but someone has to do the work. And I think that's kind of what...
It's not going to get any better if we don't try. And
exactly.
even if you don't succeed, like, you got to do. Somebody's got to do something.
And I think that is what keeps it from fully falling into the darkness. Again, watching 10 episodes in a row would probably be quite emotionally trying, but I think the payoff you get at the end of it is what justifies it.
Yeah, it's very good. All right, so that's going to do it for this list and for 2023 anime. We are moving on. We've already, as of recording, we already have first looks out for 2024. So
there's a whole new year of exciting isekai to come.
Well, we'll save that for next time. That's going to do it for this podcast. So we'll do our housekeeping. You can check us out at theglorioblog.com. Go read the original top 10 post where we've got everybody else on there writing, their opinions, especially on those shows that we did not watch. So go check that out. You can follow us on Twitter at the GLORIO blog and on co-host at GLORIO. I did want to shout out our good friend and part of the GLORIO extended family, Ben, for writing a very nice post about us on co-host. So
Thanks, Ben.
Go check out their is it a podcast or more of a playthrough?
Yeah,
or
Ben is doing a podcast about the Ace Attorney series with 2 longtime fans and 2 newcomers to the series, and they
including you most of the time, right?
I'm not on the
Some of the time?
podcast. I'm on
Not on the podcast
video
part, but
recordings.
on the recordings, yeah.
And they are most of the way through the series by now. They're doing the DLC case of Ace 25. The updated autopsy report podcast.
Yeah, it's called Updated Autopsy Report, and you can follow Ben on co-host at Yotsu Ben, YO like Yotsuba, but Yotsu Ben. And I think that's
friend of the site.
I think that's their handle on most sites, right? And then it's cool for Updated Autopsy Report. I see they got Ace Attorney.
Yes,
on co-host.
Really?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Domain squatting, they're going to be in for a fortune.
Yeah, so
goes up to be the next big thing.
Updated autopsy.report also, and
yes, for the link. But on co-host, it's at Ace Attorney, which is pretty great. So go check that out. And yeah, as far as us, the podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Amazon Music, Podbean, Stitcher, and of course YouTube, where you can like, comment, subscribe, ring that notification bell. It probably helps us more these days to either leave us a review on one of those places or comment and like on YouTube at this point. So as far as the podcast goes, so please do that. And yeah, tell your friends, tell your enemies. And catch you next time.
Peace.